Let's talk about this story with Richard Johnson, a lecturer in U.S. politics and international relations at Lancaster University. He joins us now from Devon, England. Thank you so much for joining us. Always good to see you.
Thank you very much.
First question for you. President Trump's resolve on the wall, it is steadfast. He says he'll get it built by emergency decree, and the impasse with Democrats won't be resolved by negotiating with Democrats. But he's a self-described deal maker. Where is his deal making on this?
I think there's possibly a very narrow path for a deal on some sort of border fencing. I think that's the only thing that the Democrats are willing to countenance. Is they've been talking about something called Normandy fencing, which is a particular type of structure. Trump would then call it a wall. But I think that it seems that the increasingly likely path that the president's going to take is to declare a national emergency, to embark on this on his own behalf. And I think actually from a sort of political standpoint, it's a bit of a win-win for him in terms of how his base will interpret this. They'll be happy that he's taken action. And even if the courts strike it down, which a lot of people have said could be a very real possibility, then he's able to blame the courts rather than take responsibility himself for the failure to get a deal through.
And he is sounding more and more like that is an option he may take. Just go around the Democrats and get it done. We'll have to wait and see on that. Interesting tidbit, though, on the wall I want to talk with you about. It was the idea of the self-described dirty trickster, Roger Stone, whom we know has now been indicted, a former Trump advisor. So it wasn't an idea built on analysis of illegal immigration. The candidate, Trump, played it. His base loved it, so he stuck with the Roger Stone wall for political purposes. So that's kind of an interesting side note on this. And now he's probably boxed in on the wall since it was such a big part of his campaign. Is that how you see it?
I think the politics of it are very important. It's become a sort of totemic issue in the Republican Party. I mean, we're talking something like 9 in 10 Republicans believe that a significant border wall needs to be built. And, you know, the constant mantra that I have throughout the Trump presidency is that this is a president who is focused on his base. He sees that as the way of staying in office. He sees it as a way of protecting himself from congressional Republicans who might otherwise team up with Democrats against him on the investigations that are with him. And I think that he feels that as long as he can secure, say, 9 in 10 Republican voters at the next presidential election, that's a reasonable path for him to be reelected. So I think it's right to say that this isn't really particularly about an analysis of what's the most effective way of keeping people in or out of the country, but it speaks to an issue which is very important to Republican voters, whom at the end of the day, I think he's most interested in.
Well, let's talk about what's next, the election in 2020. A new person wants to face off with President Trump. Senator Cory Booker is the latest among a growing field of candidates. Let's listen to Booker and then what President Trump had to say about Mr. Booker getting in the race.
I'm proud of not only who I am and my conviction, but this is a time where too many people, I think, are trying to pit people against each other, where the Democratic Party, I don't want it to be defined by what we're against, but by what we're for. If you're tired of that kind of bitterness, of that kind of trash talking, that kind of trolling, that kind of politics that is just a race to the bottom in our country, then don't support me. Because I'm not in this race to tear people down. I'm in this race to try to build our nation up.
I want to ask you about 2020 quickly. Okay. Senator Cory Booker announced today that he's also running. There are a lot of Democrats on the field.
He's got no chance.
No chance?
I say no
Why?
chance. Because I know him. I don't think he has a chance.
Who has a chance?
So far, I don't see anybody. I'm not impressed with their group.
All right, so he's not impressed. But what is of note, I want to talk to you about, Richard, is the lineup so far. We have 2 blacks in the race, 5 women, and a Hispanic candidate. So what do you think of Booker's opening message to keep it positive, and the field, the most diverse lineup ever?
This is a very consistent message from Cory Booker. I've spent some time researching Cory Booker. I wrote a chapter of my PhD on Booker. I've spent some time in Newark New Jersey interviewing people who have known Cory Booker over the last 20 years, and that message of unity is a message which he's had throughout his life in both municipal and statewide politics. He's faced in the past opponents who have actually had very negative and divisive campaigns against him, and he's not always been successful in Newark. The first time he went for mayor in 2002, he had a very hostile opponent, and that opponent was successful. So this unity message, although I think Booker strongly believes in it, is not always the winning message. I think that, though, for the next Democratic nominee, the African-American vote will be crucial. As we saw in 2016 and in 2008, the candidate who secures support from the majority of the African-American Democratic primary electorate wins the nomination. And that's because in some states, African-American voters are a majority. And so I think that obviously Kamala Harris and Cory Booker probably are the most likely to try and make appeals to that electorate, but I don't think any candidate can afford to ignore this very significant Democratic electorate.
All right, we always appreciate your insights, Richard.